We'll start now. Welcome everyone. My name is Adele Newton. I am the Executive Director of CSCAN InfoCan, and we're really thrilled to co-sponsor the CSearch conference this year. And it's my pleasure to introduce the moderator of today's panel, Kelly Lyons. Kelly is a faculty member in the Faculty of Information at the University of Toronto, and previously in her career worked at IBM at the Center for Advanced Studies. I will leave it to Kelly to introduce the other panelists and look forward to a really great panel. So off to you, Kelly.
Thank you very much, Adele. Welcome, everyone. I am thrilled to welcome our panelists. We have Professor, maybe you can just wave as I say your names, Professor Joe Atlee from the University of Waterloo, Ajay Ekwahida from IBM, a data scientist at IBM, and Professor Francois Rivest from Queen's and RMC, not necessarily in that order, perhaps. So as Adele said, this is the CSearch conference, and this is the career panel discussion. I want to acknowledge Maram Asi, who has helped, is the program co-chair to put together a great program, but has also helped put together this panel. So thank you, Maram. Also, what we're going to do, the way this is going to work, is we're going to have each panelist spend approximately 3 to 5 minutes talking about their career, what they do, and the path they took to get there. And hopefully that will spark a number of questions in your eyes and mind as you listen, and you can post those in the chat. I will be posing questions to the panelists after their introductions, and I will use some of the ones that came in through the form that was provided to students, but I will also take questions from the chat. You can pose one, direct it to a particular panelist, or you can just direct it to the panel in general, and I'll field those questions for you. Okay, so the order that we decided was alphabetical by last name. So we'll start with Joe.
Hi everybody, welcome to the career panel. So I guess our introduction is sort of, who we are and how we got here. So I'm a professor at the University of Waterloo in computer science. And how I got here is not by design, it's not by plan, it's not like I grew up thinking I was going to be a professor, and even in university I didn't think that I was going to be a professor. But it's not quite serendipity at all, right? A lot of it has to do with your experiences along the way and recognizing what you like and what you enjoy and following good advice from peers and from mentors. So I didn't start off in computer science. I was a physics major and discovered, but my mom made me take my first computer science course because she wanted me to work for IBM, actually. And I loved it, and it eventually became my primary major. And when it came to after graduation, I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I got lots of people, talking to me about graduate school and that I should think about graduate studies. And then when I got there, I loved that as well. I loved the teaching aspects, and I loved the research that I was doing. And even when I graduated with my degree with a PhD, I wasn't sure whether I would go into industry and industrial research or into academia, and applied to both and interviewed in both places, and eventually ended up at Waterloo. So I don't think you necessarily need to have a plan, but you need to be aware and observe your experiences and what you like, and follow your love.
Thank you, Joe. Ajay.
Hi, welcome to the career panel. I'm Ajay Ekwahida, and I studied economics and statistics from the University of Manitoba. I'm a data scientist, but just like Joe as well, I didn't plan to be a data scientist. I just really liked my maths and statistics classes, and I was like, what can I use that for? Economics to me was, I don't know, I always say that I didn't think that I was going to get a job with economics, so I just stuck with my statistics and mathematics because I've always loved statistics and mathematics right from when I was little. So I did a postgrad diploma at St. Lawrence College for business analytics, but I wanted it to be, business analytics was very businessy, but I wanted the math and stats aspect. So I started working on more on advanced statistics and advanced math so that I could set myself up for companies who were looking for data science. So I used to go to the jobs to check what they needed. So I started working on that. So I ended up at IBM 2 years ago, and I am a data scientist for them. I recently started with a group called IBM Developer Skills Network. And what they do is create courses for people who are looking to get into industry on Coursera, courses like on Coursera and edX. People are looking to get into industry or even who are working and trying to improve their skills. So I focus on statistics and data science courses.
Thank you, Aja. Francois.
Yeah, let's see. So I've started at McGill doing in pure math and computer science, kind of aiming for the big States University later on in life. As a francophone, doing to McGill was kind of the direct path, and all my friends were doing to engineering schools. And for some reasons, I thought math was important for AI. And I went to McGill in math, bored of all the other courses like chemistry and all these other things. And after 1 year of pure math, figure out that just doing math is kind of a crazy, but very great. And I started taking neuroscience, alternative science courses, and start doing research in a lab with a prof at McGill in cytology, and really start falling in love with doing research. And I guess this is where all it started. Got a first paper at ICML by the end of my degree, my undergrad degree, and then kind of checked in the box. So I didn't went for, grad school in the States or whatever. I almost failed like, we're done. What's next? And so I've stayed for a master at McGill and was extremely lucky to be one of the first students of Doina Prekap, who was actually presenting the keynote speaker. And stayed for 2 more years, got opportunity for jobs. And after grad school, I was really not knowing whether I would stay in research, because I know it's a very difficult field. You're gonna go off the country or very far away from your home. And then I've been extremely lucky again. There was this, I was always doing a bit of both machine learning and cognitive science, and, trying to find my personal position between these 2 fields. And then I've been extremely lucky to fall on a new computational neuroscience research project with Yoshua Benjo and John Kalaska at University of Montreal. And to me, that was kind of a no-brainer. It was like near where I was living. It was right on my topic. So, it was kind of a lifetime opportunity, even though these people were not as known at that time as they are today. So did my PhD with Yoshua and John, kind of shifting between doing pure machine learning and pure computational neuroscience, modeling how the brain works, trying to understand how the brain works. And again, once my PhD was done, I had a few opportunities, and one of them was a professor position at RMC, which again was close to Montreal and family and friends, which at the time in the field was extremely difficult. You often end up in very different university across elsewhere in the world. So jumped on it, and then also joined Tween as trust appointed prof, and been doing a bit of research on both since then, on machine learning and how the brains work.
Fantastic. I can hear the passion that each of you have for your careers and for the path that you took to get there. The first question I wanted to ask, and I'm going to remind participants and attendees to please feel free to post questions that you might have in the chat, and I will ask them. But the first question I have, and you've all talked passionately about what you do, is what do you like the most about what you do right now? And then on the flip side, what do you find the most challenging about? And we'll start with Francois.
What I like the most, I think what I like the most is research as one of the main factors, which as a prof, sadly, you don't get to do as much as you'd like, especially skipping my postdoc is probably missing my best research years. But doing research, like trying to answer questions or looking at questions that no one has ever looked, or in a way that no one has ever looked before, I feel is really interesting. And I also fell in love with teaching. I really enjoy teaching and, you know, transmitting knowledge to students and allowing them to become better problem solver and learn more about the field. Do you also want me to do the opposite of the question, Julie?
Yes, please. The challenge as well. Nobody wants to talk about the
challenges. One of the things I really liked when I first got into a research lab was how my supervisor there seems to be relaxed and be able to do research in a, you know, slow and interesting way. And I guess for young profs today, until your tenure or a bit after, this just won't happen. Managing the teaching load, the grant application, and still being able to do research, and especially in machine learning right now in the field that is moving extremely fast. I would say trying to balance all those aspects and the rest of your life outside of it is really the challenge for me.
That resonates with me somewhat. A little, a lot. Ajay, what do you like most about what you do right now, and what are the most challenging aspects of it?
So in my recent role, I am teaching of some sort as well. So because I create courses for online, I get to kind of bring my own flair into it. And I like the fact that I'm kept on my toes. I have to learn something new every day because I have to teach people, thousands of people that I don't know, I don't see. So that kind of gets me going every day. When I wake up, I'm like, oh, I have to learn this thing because I have to teach it. And there are things that I wouldn't say I've learned in the past, but I've not necessarily applied. So now I have to like try and apply them, make sure that it's correct before I teach it onto someone. And I've seen that actually you can't teach what you don't understand. So that has, in the past 2 months that started, that's kind of what has kept me going. So that's good. On the flip side, I want to say that I respect every professor on this call. I always wanted to be a professor, and I never knew how much work goes into being a professor. When I started at IBM, I was a consultant, so I didn't have to I only created decks for my clients, but now I have to create decks, make sure they make sense, make sure that it's easy to understand, and also create those tests. I need to talk to you all how you create tests, because I've been trying and I need to make 25 questions and I'm stuck on 15. So that's my challenge, but I enjoy it anyway.
Thank you. Yes, making tests is tough. Maybe we shouldn't test at all. Joe, tell us about what you like the most and what your biggest challenge is.
Well, so my challenge is going to be the same, right? There simply are not enough hours in the day. There are not enough days in the week, and it is partly our fault, right? So there is so much to do. There's so much interesting things to do. Many of the tasks that we take on, we take on, right? One of the wonderful things about being a professor is that there is an incredible amount of freedom that we have in deciding how we're going to spend our time and what we're going to spend it on. And I have had the privilege of changing my direction wildly over the 25 plus years that I have been doing this, right? Where at one point I thought I was going to go put most of my soul and time into teaching, and help to create the software engineering program here. And I really thought that that's where and writing textbooks on that. And I really thought that's where I was going to go. But then I got sucked back into research and was running a countrywide research group on modeling in software engineering, and I've been able to go into administration. But the nice thing about being a professor is that you can always step back and you can always redirect, right? You can go into administration and then step back into the classroom and step back into the research lab. So it is an incredible amount of work because there are so many things to do between teaching and research and service to the community and service to the university. You know, part of the reason that there's so many things to do is that we do take on some of these tasks. But I do pinch myself all the time. I cannot believe that I get paid to do what I do. It is incredibly rewarding what we do.
Great. Thank you. That is so true. It is. We are very privileged to have these jobs and be able to do what makes sense at the time and then change when things are exciting in another direction. I'm going to ask a question that came from the students in the earlier form that they filled out. And I'm going to ask each of you to address it to a certain degree. And I think it's a very interesting question, one that I've answered a lot to students in the past, is are graduate degrees recommended for industry careers? And if so, what are the most useful and why? And we'll start with Ajay for this one.
I would first say that I don't speak for all careers, but I think this is computer science, so I would speak from a data science point of view. As someone who studied economics and statistics, I think I didn't have enough information as well. And I felt like I had to have a postgrad, a PhD, and all of that. And while that is true to a certain extent, in the data industry, for example, like if you were to do data analysis or data engineering, you may not necessarily need a particular degree. I think any degree will fly as far as you're willing to learn and you're willing to code. So any degree would be fine, like literally anyone. But when it comes to things like machine learning and data science and artificial intelligence, all of them are very similar, the same. I think that there is a lot of emphasis on having the right degree. And when I was looking for jobs about 2 years ago, and I would check the job requirements for like Google and Netflix and Facebook, what I would see is that they would require a master's in something like computer science, physics, engineering, maths, statistics. I remember those were the ones that used to shout at me, and I'm like, I don't know. And some of them would even prefer that you have a PhD. In reality of things, I don't have a PhD and I don't have a master's. I have a postgrad diploma and I do data science. I do data science work. I think it also depends on how you set yourself up for industry, in the sense that how do you put yourself to learn something new every day, to get ready? How often do you check these job postings to make sure that you're ticking off a box, make sure that you're bringing something different as well? I think I'm going to add this at some point during one of the questions, but I'll add it now just in case. It's that just be ready to bring something unique. I think that when we come from technical backgrounds like computer science and statistics and mathematics, we are technical and we're technical enough. So one thing that I made a conscious effort to bring in when I was interviewing at IBM was to make sure that they understood that I could communicate my models, because a lot of us in the technical realm cannot necessarily communicate our models. I still struggle here and there, but that was something that I really sold to them and I told them I can do. So it's because I can do. So yeah, that's it. Our graduate degrees, it totally depends. I think if you study computer science, you can get a job without like a postgrad or something, like just regular computer science. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you so much. And Joe, this one's, can you maybe take it next? And also in the chat, we have a question from Robert Schmidt, who says that it sounds like a lot of the love that you have faculty teaching is about teaching, right? And what Robert is also interested in is it worth it to get a PhD if you aren't necessarily wanting to go into teaching? And so it sort of relates to this question. Mm-hmm. So I thought I'd let maybe you and Francois take that as you go.
So I think there are areas of computer science in industry that do benefit from an advanced degree, just because the technologies that are used are advanced and they tend to be taught much deeper at the graduate level than at the undergraduate level. And I would put AI in that category. I'd probably put security in that category. I also think that there are a lot of places that will look for people who have advanced degrees simply because you learn how to tackle a much larger problem and a problem that is unknown, right? So, you know, in undergraduate, most of the problems that you encounter are pre-canned assignments that we have, you know, made up for you that we know will take you, you know, a weekend or 2 weeks or maybe an entire term. But there's a lot of really difficult, wicked problems out there in computing and in computing in industry. And so there are companies who are interested in hiring people who aren't afraid of wicked problems, of, you know, going out and, you know, reading research papers and learning on their own and tackling a problem that, you know, they don't know the answer to and nobody knows the answer to, but needs to be solved. And so I think there's a lot of benefit to that a graduate degree gives you, that is not just, you know, your thesis topic, but just learning how to do research and learning how to solve major problems.
That's great, Jo. And I know from my own experience, I did not work on my thesis topic again after my PhD when I went to work at IBM. I worked on a lot of problems, really exciting problems. Some of them didn't require my PhD at all, but I did approach it like a PhD, right? Like a research. I joked that even when I had my children, I kind of approached raising children as a research problem too. It's like, well, let's try this experiment, see what happens. Don't tell my kids. Okay, Francois, what are your thoughts on this? And also maybe if you could add, because David Adams has asked about, is it necessary if you do want to teach at some point at the academic, in the graduate or at the university level, do you need a PhD? So maybe if you want to take both of those.
Yeah. Yeah, so if you want to teach, is a very big difference. And I think machine learning is also a very big different field right now because it has attracted so much other fields into its own that it made it a bit different. So the level of math you need in machine learning can go from almost nothing. We now have high school students that are doing great machine learning projects because the API exists, to the very other end. If you apply for a research position in a big place like Google, Facebook, whatever, they want a NIPS paper. That's basically what they want. So usually means a PhD and a NIPS paper. But again, it really depends at which level you want to get into that company, right? Whether you want to be at the programming engineering level or app development, or, you know, in a true research lab where they're really doing advanced research. So that part is hard to say. It really depends on what you want to do, but for sure in machine learning, I would tend to say a master level. One of the reasons is the level of math. If you come from computer science, you may have done a bit less math than people in physics or in some other field. On the opposite side, if you come from another field, make sure you've programmed, because you'll have to do it on your own first. You'll have to be able to program your own stuff and be able to do it. Teaching wise, if you want to teach in university, I would say you need at least a master's. If you really want to like be a lecturer, some people are there just because they have like 10 years in experience at IBM or other places. So that's the other way, but it's something that takes years to accumulate. The last thing I would like to say is that if you aim for a PhD, make sure you're able to run on your own, because it's a long and lonely path, and you're trying to answer something no one on earth answered. So you really have to be willing to answer such question if you would go for a PhD. I hope that kind of survey all the other things.
Thank you. That's great. There was one quick question. Do you need a master's to do a PhD? Are there programs that allow you to go in directly from an undergrad? And I happen to know there are.
I think in university, some university in Canada has a fast track program where you can switch from master to PhD quickly. I think in the States, they have a slightly different system where master's is more for people coming from the industry and paying for their study, while a PhD is more like a separate track, and you don't have to do a master and you're doing the research, hopefully with scholarship and research money. I think so, but you may correct me if.
I think that's true. Okay, so there's lots of good questions in the chat. I'm going to ask one now that I saw earlier, but I can't remember where it came from, so I apologize to the poser of that question. And I think it's a really good one. And it's, how does your current path that you're currently doing and compare to what you had as an ambition and goals when you were an undergraduate? And what advice would you give to recent grads that aren't quite sure yet what their goals might be? And Ajay, would you like to start with that one? Because you were, of the panelists, probably the most recently an undergraduate.
Sorry, could you repeat? Because I didn't hear the...
Yeah, it was, how has your career path changed compared to what your ambition and goals were when you first were an undergrad? And then what advice would you give to someone who isn't quite sure what they want to do or doesn't know what their goals are right at this time?
Okay, that's a good one. For me, I would say that it has changed a little. I don't know. My dad is an economist, and he always says that economics has roots in data science and machine learning, like when you look deep. But for me, I think that they're not necessarily the same, like undergrad versus maybe if I did a master's in it, then I could see the similarities. But I think that it has changed in the sense that the way I set out when I started university is not where I am necessarily. Like I thought I was going to do a PhD in economics and then go into like research and possibly work for the World Bank and all of that, but I'm not there. So for me, I think a lot of it was that I had to adjust to the climate as well. I had to adjust to what the world was given. So it was that economics was needed, but it was not necessarily what was needed at that point. And I couldn't give what exactly was needed. So I had to switch to technology and kind of go with that flow, since I also like maths and statistics. So in terms of the advice for when you're not sure or if you're not sure, I think that a lot of it comes from like soul searching. What do you like doing? What would you like? What do you wake up thinking, oh, this is something that I would enjoy for the rest of my life, or maybe not the rest of your life, but for another 10 years, what is that thing and how can I get to it? So that's kind of what kept me going and kind of because I knew that, okay, I like this field of data science and analytics and stuff. And I know that for a very long period of time, even if I'm no longer in Canada, I can start looking at something in my home country, which is Nigeria, and implement data science algorithms and machine learning stuff, digitization in Nigeria as well. So that kind of made me that kind of sets me in the right direction. And because I'm also very passionate about education, that kind of also puts me in, okay, I can also use AI and education. And that's something I'm very, very, very passionate about, especially for my home country, Nigeria. So I'm like, well, how can I set myself that I am useful to my generation? So that soul searching really helped me with finding my own path.
Thank you. I think that's really good advice about thinking about what you enjoy doing or what makes you happy. Joe, you talked a bit about how you started as an undergrad in physics. And so, obviously your goals and ambitions changed. What advice do you have for someone that isn't sure what they want to do?
Oh, keep your options open. And like, so I didn't know what I wanted to do. I started off as a physics major, and even once I started taking computer science, I still would pore over the options, right? I loved math, I loved chemistry, I did love chemistry. I loved physics, I loved computing. I didn't know what I wanted to do, and of course, you're eventually forced to choose. So I would say, keep your options open and recognize that no decision that you make is final, right? You can always pivot, and this is more so today than it was even when I was a student, right? That you can pivot with respect to your studies, you can pivot with respect to your careers. In physics, graduate school was expected. So I started university thinking that I would go into graduate studies. But then when I pivoted to computer science, well, then it wasn't so much expected. And so graduate school was off the table. Keep your options open, keep your eyes open, and don't feel like any decision that you make is final.
Great. I think it's especially, you're right, Joe, it's especially true now. You know, I see students that have worked with me who have gone on to do these unbelievable things that didn't even exist when I was a student. Francois, do you have something to add to the?
Yeah, I would say the same. Keep your eyes open on opportunities, because yes, I've reached my kind of goal, but that was really a question of always being open to opportunities and always to look for them and which one I'm ready to commit to and which one I'm not ready to commit to. So I've been extremely lucky, but I think I've always been open to see what are the options. You know, always ask the question, don't stick to think there's one plan. It has to be, there's a goal, but there's no single path. So that path may be very different than when you anticipate. The other thing we're not mentioning, maybe I can take a minute on this, is industry is not just about those big companies, Facebooks and Google and IBM. If you look at startups, for example, there's a lot of opportunity. And if you get in a startup with your degree or with a master's, you're basically the person who's going to solve the problems there, right? You're the most technical person as a master in that company, and you're going to be the A star there, and you may do a lot of great things for a couple of years and then switch to another startups or whatever. So, and especially today, a career in academic is probably a long-term path where you have to more stay on track, you know, in the industry, things are changing so quickly that you may have 2 or 3 different careers between your 25 and your 65. So I just repeat what Joe said, just stay open to opportunity and what could happen.
And I would also just add, make the most of what you do end up doing, right? Because sometimes it's not opportunity, sometimes things are thrust on you. And there have been a couple of times where things have been thrust on me, and my initial reaction was, okay, I will do this. I will be an office holder, but I'm not going to put all my time into it. And then, of course, you know, you learn more about, you do put your time into it, and you do learn to care about it greatly. So, you know, don't you know, yes, take the most of, you know, make the most of the opportunities that are presented to you, but also make the most of the things that are thrust upon you. And you never know what you're going to fall in love with. And, you know, so give it a shot, and then you can knowledgeably say, this is not my interest.
That's great advice. I remember when I started IBM after my undergrad, and after 2 years, when I first started, I said, in 2 years, I'm going back to do my master's. My boss said, why would you tell me that? Don't tell me that. You know, just work here and give it your all, and you might change your mind. And then, of course, the 2 years came, and I said, well, I'm going now. So how do I resign exactly? And my boss said, well, I'm going to give you a leave of absence. And I said, well, I don't think that makes sense because I'm never coming back. And he said, never say never. The world will change. You will change. IBM will change. Never say never. And look, I went back. So it was kind of great advice in hindsight. Never say never. And that question did come from Colton, I believe. So I just want to say thank you. We have another question from Keith that is asking about, and this might be a good one for Francois because it has to do with machine learning. And so looking at, is it better to dive into machine learning by looking at advanced papers and maybe all the NeurIPS articles that you mentioned earlier? Or is it better to spend more time getting foundational knowledge on math and other topics so that strong foundation can be built before looking into those papers? Do you have an advice for Keith on that?
It really depends on your background and your aim. I would say if you aim at reading NIPS paper, either you already have a strong math background or you'll figure out after a couple of hours that you need a strong math background. Your probability, your calculus, and your linear algebra have to be top to be able to read those papers. And one of the reason is they're using it. It's like programming, but instead of programming with if and for and whatever, you're programming with differential equations. This is basically what you're doing. So, and it's all about defining the objective. It's all about defining the loss. It's all about defining what will drive the top of the ODE. So it's great if you can read NIPS paper, but you know, it's gonna be hard if you don't have the math foundation. And I know it's gonna be sad. I know everyone just want to be able to program the thing and be able to use it. And you know, you can do a lot of stuff with just that. But if you really want to understand how those papers are solving the problem and have a deeper understanding of it so that you can develop advanced stuff at the NIPS level, you'll need strong math. And NIPS paper may not be the easiest way to learn straight from nothing. There's plenty, sorry, but there's plenty of other tutorial around on the internet and blogs. They've never been as much masters and PhD students trying to explain what they're understanding from these papers. That could be a great source for you to build up both the math and the understanding of the paper at the same time. That might be a better approach.
Great advice. Joe or Ajay, do you have anything you'd like to add to that? Okay. Let's move on to another question that came earlier through the panel, through the form that was put out for students. What are some of the core computer science topics that you would recommend students focus on in their studies? And maybe we'll pose that one to Francois, and if Joe or Ajay have something they want to add, they can add to it.
Well, I guess I'm going to say the same thing again. The courses I recommend are not those given in computer science. They're those you get when you do physics or chemistry. Go back and make sure you know your calculus, your linear algebra, your ODE, your probability and stats, because that's what you need for grad study in machine learning. And my biggest problem when I teach deep learning on the first course is that people don't remember to do a derivative, but that's the bread and butter. So I'd say if you're doing for machine learning, you wanna gain as much math as possible.
Thank you. Joe, what about if you want to be a software engineer? What are some core courses you should follow?
Yeah, for computing, in almost every field, it's the fundamentals, right? So in computing, it's data structures and algorithms, and I would also say math. A lot of programs are stepping away from math because they feel like, well, you don't do math day to day in a lot of computer development, but mathematics, mathematic training does change the way you think and changes your approach to problem solving. So I do think that you want to take fundamentals in data structures, algorithms, mathematics, and then the advanced courses simply build on those fundamentals.
Great. Ajay, do you have anything about, based on your experience in industry, what you think students maybe are lacking when they come in, what they should take? Or you talked about communicating your models, maybe that's part of it.
Yeah, that's one of it. And on the other side of it is what Francois and Joe has said as well. I think it's important that you have a strong mathematical background, statistics, linear algebra, all those things, they're very important. Even data structures and algorithms, I had to learn on the job, and it would be nice if you had it before you come in, so you're not like caught off guard like I was. Yeah.
Great. Another question, we talked a bit about whether grad school is needed for industry and sort of the pros and cons of I want to teach, I don't want to teach. But how do you decide if grad school is a good decision for you? And do you have any advice on perhaps choosing an advisor? And how do you choose students for graduate studies how do you go about choosing a student for graduate studies? And Joe, maybe you could take that one, and if Francois wants to add to that.
Yeah. So graduate studies is very different from undergraduate studies. It's as different as university is from high school. So it's not, you're just going to take more courses, more advanced courses. The types of learning that you do are vastly different, and you start working on research. And start working on, like I said before, problems that, nobody knows the solution to them. So you have to, I would say, I think it would help a little bit if you can gain some kind of research experience as an undergraduate, to let you see whether you're interested in that kind of problem solving. I didn't, or actually I did a little bit in physics, not so much in computing, but I would say, you want to be someone who's naturally curious. I would say that it helps to simply want to be a student all the time and always want to be learning. I think it helps to be optimistic because you want to think that you're on the right path, and that can keep you going. And I would say that perseverance is a huge factor in whether someone succeeds in graduate studies or not. So some people think, oh, I'm not the smartest person in the room, I'm not, brilliant, so, I can't get a PhD. When in fact, I would say perseverance is probably a more important trait to have in order to succeed in getting a PhD.
That's great. Thank you. Francois, do you want to add anything to that? Or?
No, I agree with everything she said. I think it's exactly that. You have to be very perseverant, and you have to be someone who likes to answer his own questions, even though no one else asked them before. These are keys. With respect to supervisor, I would say try to find someone that you feel comfortable speaking with. And one of the things you can do as a future grad students is ask the profs, other grad or undergrad students, how the person is when they're interacting, so that you can learn a bit more from the students, how their interaction is with the professors. Because every supervisors are very different, and every students need sometimes a different kind of person. And you need to feel comfortable talking with your supervisor, asking questions, and not being afraid when you don't know something. And so I guess that's my advice about that.
That's great. And Ajay, I know that you mentioned you were thinking about grad school, at one point you wanted to do a PhD. What are some of the ways that you're, thinking through whether or not that's something you'd like to do at this point in your career?
I think for me, it's even about, will I use it? Is it useful for me? And I think it is. I think that, like you said, like the approach in which you, the approach to problems is kind of different. And I see it as well with like coworkers who have like masters and PhD. When they're approaching stuff, I'm like, oh, okay, that's different. I want to approach it that way. So sometimes I even go read like all these papers so that I can see how they think, like kind of get how they think, so that I can think that way. I don't know if it works, but I think it does to a large extent. And I've heard the perseverance thing a lot, like you have to persevere. So I actually had a question for Francois, and I don't know, I'm a panelist, I don't know, but I had a question for Francois and Joe. So when you say perseverance, how do you now pick a student to do the master's or PhD? Because it's mostly based on grades, right? So I feel like someone will be wondering that as well. Like a lot of people are perseverance, but may not necessarily have the grades. So how do you balance that out when you're picking a student?
Great question. Joe, go ahead.
It is a great question. So I have only come to realize recently how important perseverance is, and I haven't started to incorporate that into the admission selection process, but I might, right? There are these grit score tests that you can apply, or you can ask about people's experience, growing up, and the kinds of things that they have done for long periods of time, right, where they actually had to learn and improve and still, push forward and push through challenges and to reach success. And they can be as simple as music training, right? They don't just dabble in something and give up, or do something for a quick win, but they actually go through the motions of the hard work and the hard practice of acquiring a skill. So I think there are some things that you could ask that are completely outside of what you would expect in a graduate application process. Otherwise, I do look for grades. I don't look for overall grades, like your overall GPA. I don't really care, because I know that some people don't do well in particular areas that they don't care about. And so I look for particular courses that I care about and how well students did in those courses. And I ask about what kind of big project they've done.
Francois.
Yeah, well, this is what I was about to add. Grades, sadly, are first mean of evaluation. Just that's the first thing we can really see. But of course, not every student has great grades in all the courses, depending on whether they are interested in it or not. I didn't have great grades in math for the first time in my life when I did pure math at McGill, but at the same time I was doing research and was able to get publication by the end of my undergrad. So there's always other factors. What I'm looking is really students that is willing to learn, students that has strong marks in key courses like fundamentals and algorithms or in math. And when I say math, it's because usually on the CS program, it's an applied math course, so I expect good marks on that. Pure math is a bit a different beast. Willingness to learn, and what have you done on your own? What have you started projects on your own? Have you started? And I'm not talking about making a web page, but really trying to get a whole kind of semi-advanced project on your own, and were you passionate about it? Because with perseverance, the other thing that comes with is motivation. So if you're someone that are passionate about your research question, then perseverance kind of come with it, or it's easier on perseverance because you're already motivated. So yeah, these are the kind of things I'm looking. So what kind of projects have you done, and are you passionate, and are you willing to learn? Are you interested in learning? You have to be ready to learn every day. Yeah.
Kylie asks, what if you've had a bad semester? You've had to overcome something. Should you explain what happened that semester when you send your transcript? Now, for grad school, you also do a personal statement or a position statement, typically. Should you explain that in your statement, Joe?
I think if you've had a bad term, like a full bad term, I think it makes sense to say, what happened. We can't take it into account unless you tell us. But a bad grade here and there will not stop you. So even though I went into math and into computing, I had some bad marks on in my math courses. I had differential equations as a physics degree, and I got a D in there because I got a 0 on my first open book midterm. So you would think that that's not possible, but it is. And just recognize that you can overcome most failures. You can overcome most failures, and most failures do recede over time. Right? They don't continue to affect your life. They don't continue to affect your ability to succeed in the same way that your marks from high school and 8th grade don't matter to you anymore. There's lots of things that are happening to you now in university that seem all encompassing, but after a while, it's like they don't matter. What matters is what you've been doing most recently. So you really can't overcome most ill failures.
Right, and I would say if you've had a bad semester and you're comfortable to explain without giving away any private information, you can use that to actually demonstrate how you have persevered and overcome a significant challenge in your life to carry on with your projects and succeed. And I think that may be seen as a very positive aspect of an application. Another question that is coming from Robert is, do you look at the schools that students attend when making your assessments? For example, if someone is at an online only school, would that make a difference? And I'll send that one to Francois. You're muted. So the question is, do you take the schools that students attend into account when making your assessments? It's an online only.
That's a difficult one. In general, no. It may happen a bit. I don't know. That's a very good question. Looking at the schools itself, I guess some schools are impressive from the beginning, but other than that, we don't know enough about all the schools or all the other universities, or things may vary so much. I'd say no, not much.
Joe, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, so I try not to. So there are smart people everywhere, and I have found that I talk to all applicants. So it's not like I make a decision by reading the application only. I talk to all applicants, and they do the talking, not me, right? Because I want to hear what they know and how they express themselves, and I want to hear their passion, and I want to hear the depth of their experiences in their projects. So, and that is what I tend to base my my selection on. And since I have done that, I have much more success in hiring students that do succeed than back in the day when all I did was read applications.
Is there something in your schooling that if you could go back and do it over again, you would change? Ajay? I don't know if I had that one for you, but
I was going to call, yes. I was going to come and say yes, but I would tone it down. Yes, absolutely. I was, economics was put on me. You know how you say some things where you just get it. It's not something you really wanted to do. I didn't want to study economics. I wanted to do engineering, but I studied economics anyway. I think if I was going to go back, I would study computer science and statistics, or computer science and mathematics, just because I feel like, you know what, maybe it's because of where we are at right now in the world, like the technology and everything. But I think that it's just something that I love and something I'm passionate about. I like what the different ways that you can go with it. And I think also when I meet pure computer science students, I like how they like approach like their programming. For example, as against me, who is statistics and data science, and I'm programming, and someone's like, IJ, you need to do better with this code. So I think that's, and I don't know, I just find it very interesting, and I think it's something I would have definitely. And I think also I would have taken networking more serious. I would have taken mentorship more serious, and those kind of things. Like I would have found a mentor when I was in undergrad, rather than waiting till I was done and then start looking for a mentor. Fun fact, Kelly is my mentor. So yeah, so I would have done that way earlier than I did in life. Yeah.
well, thank you for that nice compliment. Joe, I saw your head nodding. Do you agree with the networking and the mentoring, or is there something you would change?
I wouldn't change a whole lot. Like there's all sorts of different decisions I could have made. I'm not someone who spends a lot of time regretting. I tend to be more forward thinking. I do believe that networking is incredibly important. So I don't have a single mentor. I instead focus on trying to create a network of mentors, right? And that way you can reach out to different people depending on what question you have. And it's always good to reach out to more than one person and get a collection of advice from different people. So I do believe in the value of a network, and have a very diverse network of people, you know, who are peers, and people who are ahead of you, and people who are behind you, and male and female.
That's great. And we're almost out of time. It's hard to believe this has gone so quickly. We have one more question. I'm going to throw it at Francois. Because you were lucky to, or think you were planned so well to have Joanne Atlee as your supervisor early on. What would you consider in picking a mentor for graduate school or a supervisor? Their research output, the size of their lab, what do you look for?
Oh, very good question. With 20 years of experience now, well, as I said a bit before, I think try to look for someone who you feel comfortable interacting with. That's always very helpful. And one advice I would say is try to join a lab that are doing research very, very closely related to your research question. When I was doing RL with Dinah, she was an RL expert that was relatively easy. When I went at U of M doing computational neuroscience, I have ended up picking a machine learning question that was more like reinforcement learning, while most of people in my lab were doing batch learning and static learning. And then in the neuroscience aspect of my work was dopamine. It was a hot topic at the time with all those results showing that dopamine and reinforcement learning were actually the same thing. But my supervisor in the lab where I was, they were all electrophysiologists of motor control, not doing dopamine at all. So everyone has been very supportive, but it was very difficult to do a research, even though it seems like, yeah, you had a neurophysiologist and you had a machine learning person. Yes, but within those fields, I was still far away from what everyone in the lab was doing. So yeah, try to find a lab that is as closely related as possible to your question also. That would be like the second tip.
Great. Well, I have learned so much. I wish I had been at this panel when I was an undergraduate or when I was a graduate student just starting out. So I want to say thank you to our amazing panelists. It was a very, very helpful sharing of expertise and knowledge and experience that I think will stay with people for a long time. And now I'd like to throw it to Alex, who is the general chair of the conference, to say a few final words.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Kelly, and thank you for chairing this panel. It's been a fantastic experience, and I think we got a lot of different questions answered. I'm excited to, with all the new information I was getting from all of this. Coming up next, we have our last student talks. So we'll be moving right over to that as soon as we're done here. And I encourage you all to come join us and see some of the research that students are doing on their path towards a career like these ones. So thank you very much again, and everyone will see you shortly.